Welcome to this episode of the Down the Pub podcast. Once again, it's a little bit of a sullen mood after we lost again, but we thought instead of just going back to the game and reliving the torture, probably look at we kind of do like an overview of where we are, kind of a state of the union of where the Wanderers are right now and what maybe what's causing the issues. Here to break it down, like the young people say, is Gary and Chris. Welcome back to the show, boys.
Thank you for having us.
I know it's weird. It's kind of weird. I keep saying like welcome back to the show when you are like on the show. It's fucking weird.
I think you do it to keep us on our toes. It makes us
Yeah,
feel
yeah.
dispendable.
You can
So,
you can be cut at any time.
mm,
I'm glad you're over your illness, Gary. We've all
yeah, the
yeah
the the
preparation
piles have
H.
cleared up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the preparation H has kicked
yeah.
in. So
Did that did the trick.
yeah.
Yeah, too much.
It was the talk of the town before the Saint Laurent games. Gary, okay? I said, he's
Is
up there. I said,
is
he's
that why
here.
is that why
Yeah.
he always stands for the
Yeah,
entire game?
yeah. It was like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It was like announcements made over.
Yeah.
Pray for Gary.
So just to lift the hood up on the workings of this podcast, listener, what I originally wasn't going to be on this episode either because they were going to record earlier in the week, and Anthony was brainstorming what fake illness he'd give me this week. So I don't know what you've missed out on.
Yeah, I was
Toy
gonna
toy truck in my bum, maybe.
yeah, I was
Could be
gonna go.
anything.
I think I was gonna go with dysentery this week, just as a kind
Yeah.
of like brought on by the preparation H, and you're in absolute agony with piles and diarrhea. So, all right, so that's enough poo talk. So, well, I guess our season's kind of poo talk. So, so I guess Gary, I'll start with you because I thought it was very such a really well written piece, your blog that you wrote, as they always are. It was amazing. And I feel like you're really good at encapsulating what it is to be a football fan, and what it feels like after defeats and stuff like that. But it was so funny that like you wrote it so quickly after that game. I was kind of wondering like what was going through your head when you kind of left the stadium to inspire you to write it. And as a Wanderers fan, and obviously you're like a very knowledgeable football, what's going on? Where are we with this team?
That's a big question. The second
Yeah,
part of it.
yeah, yeah.
First part of it, when I left the stadium, I was just really down. I felt bad for everyone. I felt I feel like my reaction in moments like that is I like maybe I'm overly empathetic, but I like feel sad for people rather than feel angry about things. I don't know why. Like with Arsenal, I end up feeling angry, but maybe because with Halifax and you build relationships with people at the club, it's more sadness and you feel bad about it. Didn't plan to write anything at all, but then I got up early. Was walking to, I basically said it in the article, like got up early, was walking to the gym, walked past the stadium, and I was just like, it looked so sad because all the stuff was still there. Like no one had cleaned up. Like all the Canadian Championship banners were still there, and it just like I felt like walking in on a really sad place. And then when I got in last the night before, I'd read. I shouldn't have been triggered by it, but there was a lot of like angry tweets, which I completely understand. I'm not telling anyone how to feel. Like you should feel frustrated and down and angry after something like that. And I was just thinking about all them. And basically the article was just an extended tweet. I was just going to tweet something about how like I feel like in situations like this, obviously all the players are down, the coaching staff are down, the ownership's down, and maybe the priority should be kind of wrapping our arms around them and that situation instead of kind of being angry about it and shouting at them for letting people down. It's just no one wasn't trying. It just didn't come off, and confidence is clearly low. Um, and it reminded me, just like I said, like when my dad was alive, just watching him go into Chelsea most of my childhood, he'd always be going, and they weren't very good at that time either. And I was kind of like reflecting on how I felt, and I feel like I'd kind of watched him watch a terrible team for a lot of years in my childhood, and they ended up getting good actually towards the end of his life, but for like most of it they weren't very good. And just kind of watching how he dealt with that, and now I'm following a sports team closely. I feel like I've started to mimic that myself because um yeah, I just feel like they need our support,
But
which is very like kind of like overly sentimental reaction probably, but I don't know. That's,
it does feel kind of different because like I'm a Tottenham fan, but like it is kind of, even when I lived in Ireland, it was obviously quite far away, right? So you didn't have that emotional attachment to it, as it being your local team. And I think with this one, because we've been there from the start too, it just it hurts a little bit more, I guess. And you kind of feel a little bit more, and as you said, like you kind of there's like 6,500 other people there with you, all going through the same roller coaster. And
mm,
it kind of, when you're walking away, and you kind of you see the how people react to different things. It is kind of hard to know what to how to react, and I think that your piece uh really helped, I think, the next day, because it's kind of nice that you kind of feel somebody else has gone through the mill with you, if you know what I mean. So
mm.
yeah.
Have you ever read Fever Pitch by Nick Hornby?
No.
It's a bit of an Arsenal book, but it's basically him talking about watching Arsenal in the 70s and 80s. And so the whole book's about supporting a really big club. But then there's one chapter when he went off to university, he started to watch his local team, and I think it was Cambridge United was his local team. They're in the fourth division at the time. And he talks about it that in that book, how like kind of the process of being a supporter became completely different because he had relationships with, he'd see the players down the pub, he knew the manager and stuff. And your reaction to the highs and lows is completely different because when you support a global club like Man United or Tottenham or Arsenal, it's brilliant when you win, isn't it? But you are
Yep.
still detached from it in some way. There's a barrier there. But when you can actually share the highs with people who are involved directly in it, that's an even better feeling. And but the lows are worse, I think, because you empathize with them and you feel bad for them as people.
That's a good point, when you talk about like sitting on the pub, or even just like going to get some milk, and you kind of see somebody walk around Sobeys or Walmart or wherever, you know what I mean? So I guess I did give you the second part of that question about where we are,
Oh
but
yeah.
I think I'll let Chris
Pass.
jump in on this one,
Mm.
just to shut you up for a sec, Gary, because you like it.
Going on a bit.
Yeah. No, but Chris, I guess um like looking at where we are, like the game didn't go well. I thought we played. I don't want to get deep into the game because we kind of look at it as a whole, but I thought it was there's been parts of the season where we've looked really good, and
Yep.
things have clicked, and we've been unlucky where we've hit the bar. Like I think you said, like last week, we've hit the post the most out of anybody. So there's like there is light at the end of the tunnel, but obviously there's a lot going wrong too, where we kind of just seem kind of slow and da 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 da. So where do you think we're at, and like what do you think is causing this?
Well, I think the easy cliche answer is now would be the time to hit the reset button. What that entails and encompasses, I have no clue. I don't know if it's a tactical thing, if the coaching staff have got their heads together and decided to revert or maybe change things up a little bit, go to plan B much sooner than they intended. I don't know if it's a player philosophy change, whether they as a player group got together. Players only meetings happen in a lot of other sports than football, but they do happen in football and they usually come with an effect. So did the players get together? Have they been talking personally? Have they been, I guess, trying to get through this together, or are they getting through this on their own? I know this doesn't really answer the question, where are we as a club? But I think that to an extent, I don't know if they know where they are right now. Not to be too dramatic, but this was probably the most disappointing and hardest night for a lot of these guys' careers, and not just the young guys either. I can imagine that guys like Valesky and Telfer, Rampersad's been here for 6 years. This is probably his lowest of low for his time here, and we've had some lows here. So to me, it's a kind of a heavy-ish question because I feel like different players take these type of situations differently. They react to them differently and they recover from them differently. I've spoken to a couple of people both within the club and around the club, and It seems like the reset button has been hit to an extent. The intensity is improved in training. There's still that positivity. There's still that togetherness. There's still that union. It feels like a team that's won 4 matches in a row, the same way you'd think a team would look and feel that lost 4 in a row, especially the way that the balloon popped there against St. Laurent. So I can't say for certain how the club is feeling, but personally, I think that this is type of thing that happens to every team every year. There's always adversity. There's always either a tough patch of form, maybe a player gets hurt or sold, where something happens that really changes the dynamic of a team, and how a team responds and reacts to that is what defines them. And I think that as detrimental and difficult as that match was against St. Laurent, this is that early season opportunity to hit that reset button and hopefully start fresh.
Yeah, it was definitely a shock because, we kind of talked before I came on here. We're recording this obviously tonight when the TFC are playing Saint Laurent, and it kind of stings a little bit. And I'm sure it's stinging Derek because it's a big lot of money that we're missing out. And obviously, like, not just the money part of it, it's the prestige of hosting um, a team like TFC again here in Halifax, and it helps with the stadium stuff and all that kind of stuff. But Gary, I kind of wanted to just touch a little bit, get your obviously opinion on the same question I gave to Chris, but there was a clip which I didn't really particularly like, but I can see why it was put out there, of Patrice looking desperate. Like, you can tell this is hurting him, and he's earned like a lot of time, I think, with us, like from last season, and the joy he brought to the club like last year, and the great run we had and all that kind of stuff. But you can tell this is hurting him, and that, like, I didn't particularly like the way they kind of share. Like, sometimes you just need to have a minute to yourself, you know what I mean? And I just felt like, and it is probably part of the professional game, having cameras stuck in your face all the time. But sometimes it's like, just let the man have his minute. But for Patrice, like, do you think that as a professional manager and stuff like that, like, what does he take too much on his shoulders? I think, like, do you think, like, looking at that picture, you're kind of going, like, you got to step back yourself a little bit and stop being, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of yeah, because I mean, it happens in football. You see Eric Ten Hag the other night, like, he United lost again, and it's just kind of, do you feel like sometimes you can't separate the professional part of it from taking it personally?
No, I don't think it's that. I mean, I think his big thing is never too high, never too low, isn't it? He said it to us a lot of times when we interviewed him, and I think generally he's very good at that. You don't see him overly celebrating, and you normally don't see him looking too down either. And actually, that moment, I was aware of that moment as it was happening, and I don't know if they edited it weirdly, but that reaction was immediately after Christian missed the penalty. Because after every penalty, I would just glance over, because I was
Yeah.
directly opposite them, just glance over at the bench, and Christian missed the penalty, and Patrice immediately sat down, and his head was in his hands for probably only 10 seconds. Then he was up again, and he was kind of being level again, and not too high or not too low again. But it was just a brief moment, and yeah, same as you, mate. Like, I understand why the CPL socials put it out, because at the end of the day, sport is theatre, isn't it? And people relate to moments of high emotion, and they know that's going to drive engagement. Personally, like I would rather not see that, and I've like didn't enjoy seeing it in the slightest. But I understand if you're a neutral social media site and your boss is expect engagement, something like that will do better than um, whatever other footage they could have used. So I guess that's just the world we're living in. Um,
All about the
engagement
clicks,
drives
right?
everything. Yeah, engagement drives everything, doesn't it? It's just the nature of the world.
Part that bugged me the most, and I even said it to you guys in the group, and of course I took a step back to think about it. Like, we want to be with the big boys, so this is what happens with the big boys. But this is the step to put it on social media. I get that whole engagement thing, but I do also have to, like, consider the fact that I've worked in that space before. I worked in that space for NBC. So you have to toe the line sometimes, what's professional and what's human. Anthony's question, I totally got what he was saying, even though it took you a second, Anthony.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I was just trying to
but
form my thoughts about how to say
but I
it.
knew, but that's the sensitivity of it. Even in asking the question, you have to try to find the perfect way to put it, and that's how working these social media sites, these social media pages for a company in One Soccer Media Pro that wants to grow, and the Canadian Premier League wants more eyes on their product as well. To me, it's still kind of an element of selling out where Patrice, as you mentioned privately and publicly, Anthony, Patrice gives so much of his time and so much of his brain to the public as it is. He's not anybody who's shy of the camera, but he's getting so much flack, for example, for not doing the post-game press conference. And I kind of thought to myself, and to an extent, like, well, I mean, if you're going to take one of the lowest moments of my career and try to make some views off of it, you don't need to hear my voice. So I can't slight Patrice whatsoever if that's the reason he didn't do the presser. And I don't want to speculate on that again. I love Patrice. From what I heard, Jordan did an incredible job. So all was well as far as I'm concerned with the press conference. It's water under a bridge. Anybody who makes that a big deal, they're just looking for something to make a big deal out of. But that's the part that bugged me in a weird way. Like, you got your broadcast bite. If somebody's going to rewatch the game, they'll see it. But to just take that moment, it's a low point of someone's career, and try to double down on that to make engagement, to make some kind of stat that you're going to present to an advertiser. Patrice isn't a robot. Patrice is a human. So, I mean, I get it, but that's the part that bugged me sincerely the most.
Like, to me, like, the story was the underdogs winning, right? So, I mean, like, there was already a story there, and like it was just kind of like clickbait kind of thing. You know what I mean? I just felt like, like, obviously everybody, they could have scanned around the whole stadium and they would have seen those sort of faces. And I just thought, just allow people just to have their minute. Like, put the camera at their bench and put a picture of their coach reacting to Valesky missing. You know what I mean? Anyway, we could go on for that forever. But yeah, Gary, so I just kind of want to get your thoughts, just flipping back to this overview thing we wanted to kind of talk about. Like, so what's your State of the Union address, I guess, would be the question.
I've dodged that question twice now, haven't I?
I
Two
know,
questions in
I
a row.
know,
I've like
I know.
focused on the non-part of that. I think the reason why is because it's not clear to me yet, to be honest. I feel like the sample size is so small. Um, I feel like I always say at the start of the season, give it 10 games. I feel like after 10 games, you've got a well-rounded idea of the direction of travel of a team. The way I look at it at the moment, we've played 4 games. We played really well in one game. We played poorly in 2 games. And the other game, we played well, but there's a massive asterisk next to it because we played not 70 minutes with 10 men. That is not a big enough sample size to make any judgments or draw any conclusions from, which is funny because we're going to try and do exactly that throughout the course of the next 40 minutes or so. But it's really not. I mean, I've seen we'll get to it in questions, but there's a lot of talk about um, switching formations. I do feel like we're starting to over-index that a little bit because the changes between what you might call the first 2 games of the season formation and last season's formation, on a piece of paper, maybe they look quite drastic, but in practice, they're not that drastic. It's 85% the same as it was last season. There's just some tweaks. So it's not this huge change that would have kind of disrupted all the players. It's a small change. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's it. I think we're just integrating a new group of players, and the partnerships that existed last season aren't those players aren't really playing together at the moment because we've been moving a lot of players in and out because of injuries and trying new little shapes, and all of that together means we haven't quite hit fluidity yet. But we're 1 win away from basically being exactly where we were at this time last year, out of the Canadian Championship with 3 points on the board. Maybe we'd have been at 4 points by now because of all the draws, but it's not that far off. And I mean, I think obviously results lead analysis, but if a Pacific penalty had been bad and one of ours has been good, the story would have been Pacific going out to TS Rovers of of
Yeah.
the lower league, but we had one bad penalty where they had one good penalty and we're the story. And I think we as fans and the club has to own that because it is a story. It's a good story for everyone except us. But it's just those small little details which over the course of 4 games, I don't think we can let them drive the narrative too hard because they are just details. They're inches and I'm yeah, I'm gonna wait until the 10th game before drawing any strong conclusions, to be honest. But I do agree with what Chris said about even if that's the way I feel, I think internally within the group, they're probably viewing things now as a bit of a fresh start. Like, okay, that first 2, 3 weeks of the season has not gone to plan. Let's draw a line under it. Much like Chris, I've heard training has been very good since the CS Saint Laurent match. I feel like the mood is growing. So yeah, I fully expect us to start to kick on now.
I think not having that game against Ford probably helped too, because I think like
Yeah.
the worst game you'd want to have after a game like that is Ford away. So I think like especially with the that was always going to be that kids game we were going to do. So we would have been playing in front of 14,000 people on Tuesday at 11 o'clock in the morning. So I think them getting through really helped us, I think. And I think it gave us that little bit more time to kind of tweak things and get people back and all that kind of stuff. So we're going to get into the questions and we're going to talk a little bit about the Vancouver news today as well. But and obviously talk about the game on Saturday. But Chris, the reason why I want to get into questions is because I do want to get your opinion on something, and somebody has actually asked a kind of question about it. So Carrie Ryan, while tactics and individual performance can be refined, chemistry seems to be a big issue. What do you think are the strongest partnerships on the pitch? Which ones need to be developed? And without the big man, Daniil Henry, who has needs step up as the leader in the dressing room. So before you get into all that, like I do want to talk a little bit about Dan Nimick as well. He was a really good leader out on the pitch, and you could see there was a time in the beginning of the match where he blocked a shot and he literally lost his fucking shit at everybody, which was great to see, right? Because we kind of need that right now. And in his press conference afterwards, he was not shy with his his fury with the team, I guess, because he says things like people being held accountable and people not having nowhere to hide and kind of emotive statements like that. So, what's your thoughts on who's stepping up and your thoughts on Dan as well?
Well, who's stepping up is actually Saturday will tell a big part of that story. There's a couple names that I have penciled in who I would hope lead by example both on the field and with their voice. I look at guys that have been here for years. I always say Andre Rampersad, more of a club captain, not so much a playing captain, but I need to see and hear him more. We know Jeremy's got the voice. Aiden's been here long enough now. He knows what it means to us, what it means to him. I think Saturday against Cavalry, as much as the result is going to matter, it's just that reaction. It's just, are these guys going to be cohesive on the field? Are we going to see conversations rather than yelling and slapping hands at one another? Are we going to see more high fives and more let's goes? It sounds corny and it sounds cheesy, but if they're at least showing and presenting to the fans, some of which are already on that waiver, that they're together and that they're playing with that chemistry that Carrie said does appear to be lacking, then I think people will calm down a little bit. I'm not trying to like predict anything, but even if we lose a tight result to Cavalry, as long as the boys show that heart and commitment that Patrice really extracted from this club last year, that to me is a step forward that is just as important as finally getting that first point on the board. In terms of partnerships, I'm not mad at Patrice for trying to bring Julian Dunn into that mix, because I feel like if you have peak Julian Dunn, him, Kale, and Dan together, especially in the ways that we've seen the defense express themselves in attacking positions, it made a lot of sense. Has it worked? You could say no, but I think it's a no more so based on the results as opposed to the performance. We're talking about situations, I don't want to bring it up because it happened in the first frigging game of the season, but that Julian Dunn mistake, you're talking about a completely different result. in that first match if he doesn't get his foot caught up in the grass or whatever the hell happened in that situation, right? So to see Patrice go back to Old Faithful with Kale and Dan for the Saint Laurent game, I want to see that going forward. I feel like Zach is a little more comfortable getting into attacking positions, knowing that those two guys are behind him. That unity and that chemistry that they had last year, it kind of showed a little bit in the Saint Laurent match. There weren't a lot of positives to take out of that match, but I really, really, really enjoyed Zach's freedom. It's just Saint Laurent found a really good way to stunt that freedom. So I want to see more of that. The midfield, you know, I feel bad for Rampy sometimes because he's been here for 6 years. You go back to the first year, who was here year by year, different names, different faces. He always still seems to find a way to fit in. Him and Jeremy, for their year together, or 2 years together, they didn't play together a lot, at least as a two. So even they're trying to really work out some kinks with their relationship and their chemistry. And, you know, I think that that's one of the waivers right now in Patrice's head as well, is how is this midfield going to be structured? You know, Gary made a good point earlier, the tactics and these type of philosophies, it's not really that important because a lot of what is this year is very similar to last season, but it's the personnel. Like Gary said, integrating new players. Patrice, you know, I'm going to just say it out loud. The fans are not happy with how Ryan Telfer has performed, but Patrice is really trying to, I don't know, maybe bang his head against the wall and get Ryan into a role where he finally feels comfortable. Then he can start to express other players in that role, in that position, and not run the risk of being a step behind. Because once that player then kind of loses a bit of form, Ryan is ready and Ryan's in form. It's frustrating, but it happens at some point in the season anyways. If we've had a fit Massimo Ferrin and he needs a rest, Ryan would have had to come in anyways. He's coming in cold, but he's had the tactical and philosophical run out already early this season. So the partnerships, to answer her question, I'm not too concerned because I still think that they're working out those kinks. This reset button might actually bring out something in some of the guys that have struggled early this season. But I think the big ones is just making sure that that spine has confidence, and you know, having Kale and Dan together brings me more confidence. Once Jeremy and Rampy start to click, then whoever's in front of them or next to them, be it Probo, be it Daniels, Diaz, they'll just feel like there's more security. It's hard to say be patient, especially with this fan base. And I can't blame people for feeling impatient, but I think that this is something that people need to be a little more patient.
Go ahead, Gar.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback off something Chris said then, because it made me think of when we're talking about chemistry and players playing with each other the first time and getting used to each other. If I was to ask you to tell me what the Halifax Wanderers starting lineup was from about June onwards last season, we'd be able to name 8 or 9 of the players. If I was to ask you what the Wanderers lineup was from April till June last season, no one would be able to say what it was because we were changing every single game. I think we started off with like Campagna and Omar in central defence and Nimick as a right back,
Yeah.
because they were workshopping all of that, and that's another reason it took us 8-9 games to get the first win. So I think it's a kind of a similar thing happening this time. But because we've had a few defeats instead of draws, because we've had the gut punch of CS Saint Laurent, again, we're over-indexing a little bit, and it feels like this bigger thing than it actually is. It's just they're just working out who works well with each other and where the chemistry is in the team, because you sign players with that. We sign players with an idea of who they'll click with, but you don't know until you see them playing with each other and just kind of reacting to each other. So I think that's part of it as well.
Were you happy with like what Dan said? Do you think it's like the right approach to step out and basically call people out?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that will be happening in the dressing room. They'll be arguing with each other. I mean, every dressing room is like that. You argue and you call people out if they're underperforming. And as long as you don't come out and name names, I think it's absolutely fine to, like, you think like when coaches do press conferences, when players do press conferences, they're not really talking to us a lot of the time. They're talking to the people who are back in the dressing room, and they're sending veiled threats sometimes to those people. So when Dan comes out of a comment like that, he's not telling us that. He's telling whoever he thinks is not kind of pulling their weight. He's telling them that, and that's all that matters.
He's one of the silver linings. Like, again, there's not too many of that match. Dan played the best match he played all year. And I mean, people are going to point, oh, they gave up 2 goals to an amateur side. That's not an amateur side. I think the supporters coast to coast know who some of those lads are now on CS St. Laurent. They're saying, why isn't this guy on my team? Why didn't we sign this guy? How did this guy get overlooked? There's too many intricacies to how good that club is, but that's an aside. Dan, that leadership that we were talking about, even beyond the press conference, like I got to chat with him after the match. And obviously everybody had a sad face. Everybody had a different style of a sad face, a different style of emotion. Guys apologize, and you just tell them, don't apologize, man. There's nothing to be sorry about. This, I'm sorry for you. I feel bad for you. Dan just had this look on his face, almost of work to do. Now we've got work to do. He obviously looked sad. He looked dejected, but you could tell that he had that chip on his shoulder already, and he was ready to eat it. Like, we've got work to do. And like I said, this had to have been the most devastating night for a lot of these guys' careers. And it might have been that for Dan's. I would assume it is, considering he's still quite young and these are the early remnants of his professional career. But I saw a young man grow very, very quickly, where at the beginning of the season, we were maybe a couple of question marks, was a little erratic. Is this forward freedom in his play going to affect his defensive ability? None of those worries anymore. He was top quality on the field. Their first goal was it was what it was. It was emotion and reaction and refereeing, let's just say. The second goal was a heartbreaker, right? Deflected shot. Yan lost his footing. It's in. There's nothing as you could do as a defender. So I tell people, Yan and Kale played a tremendous match together against a team that I was saying to you, Anthony, when we didn't really preview the match, but I said these guys play very downhill. We saw that. They weren't scared to get forward. They weren't scared to take those gambles and risks. And I thought Dan and Kale did a tremendous job. But it was after the match, kind of piggybacked off of that press conference comment. I saw it immediately after the match when they were walking around the field. He's ready to work, and I like to see that from a young player.
Yeah, I think I agree with you that he's been probably our standout player so far. Obviously, you hope it's not your defenders doing that, but yeah, he's been really good, and it's great to see him kind of stepping up and putting some meaning behind the captain's Iron Man. So,
and real quick too, we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. The Daniil Henry effect. This could be a small side effect of that. Him being next to Daniil having this role more privately. He wasn't doing the press conferences and stuff like Dan is, but Dan saw that leadership for a few months, and now he's got that asset in his catalog. So long may it last.
Yeah. Gary, this one's for you. This is from Felipe Vallejo, who is very well known in soccer circles here in Canada. Should Patrice ditch the pure back three and return to what he was working on last year? Is that even an option at this point? And was it too soon to make drastic tactical changes in just year two?
Yeah, good question. And Philippe has a really good podcast as well to plug. Another CPL podcast, the Coast to Coast podcast.
Yep.
I listened to all of their preseason preview pods covering each team, and I thought it was very, very well done. In terms of the question, it's kind of, I alluded to this earlier. Yes, for the first couple of games, we were playing more of a 3-4-3, but I do think over the last 2 games we've jumped back to the shape we were going with last season. And the overall point I want to make on this is that they aren't hugely different, those two looks. The 3-4-3 or the 4-3-3, the way we end up playing them, they're not that different. And I think you referred to it as like more of a pure 3 at the back this season. But in attacking phases last season, we were very, very much a 3 at the back team. The only difference was what happened on the wings, because last season we kind of had in attacking phases, we had a back 3, we had 2 holding midfielders, Our right back became a right winger. I've said all this a million times. This season it's slightly changed. Kind of the right side of the pitch is almost the same because you've still got three at the back. You've still got Zach as a really attacking right wing back. But it's on the left side now where we also have a left wing back who's up and down, and the left winger is now more of a central 10. So that's really the only little tweak. It's not a huge difference. And so I don't think that tactical change is enough to have completely changed how we perform, especially because, again, for the last two games, it looked to me anyway, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's looked to me like we've gone back to last season's shape for the last two games. And I think that's just been a case of we probably the coach is thinking we just need to get on the board here. We need
Yeah.
to get some points in the bag. We need to get confidence going again. And once confidence is up again, we can slowly start to kind of reintroduce this newer way of playing we've come up with. So yeah, we have changed how we play this season, but not so dramatically that this would be affecting the results too much, in my opinion.
So this kind of like leading into Nico Bentley's kind of comment, but I think as well the reason why we had a kind of maybe a different shape is because Massimo Ferran's been injured, and I think we've kind of reverted back to where we are because we're starting to be able to integrate him back into the team. And Nico was kind of just kind of saying like, what do you think? We've had a fair amount of injuries. What do you think has had more of an effect on the start of the season? Should we change tactic until more players are healthy, or just tough it out? We've kind of changed. We have kind of changed back to
Mm.
where we were, and I think that more like players coming back, like being fitter, I think is probably the best way to put it. That you're starting to see the team kind of almost revert back to where we were last year. Maybe that's why we had to change it because we had different people. So
Yeah,
uh,
I agree with that. You play with the hand you're dealt, don't you? And Massimo Ferrin has been a huge miss.
yeah,
I think him being missing is we would have more points on the board if he hadn't been missing. And the fact that we've only been able to use him for 20 minutes here or there tells me there is something going on. But just his ability to stretch teams, to hold the width, to drive, to carry the ball. He's our best finisher as well. He's such a big miss, and hopefully he's fit for Saturday because, as I'll get to in opposition corner, I think he's the key to everything.
yeah. I mean, like even with Roddy Fraser coming back in, it's kind of we kind of talked about. I think that a lot of it was the players we brought in were just to complement where we were last year. And I think we haven't had that option because the players that were our standout players from last year haven't really been available. So I think that's probably part of it. And, we've also not seen Victor Diaz very much either, right? So, and I think he was probably a big part of what the plans were for this year. So, Chris, this one is for you. And I think, um, it's it's kind of tough, but a lot of, as you could have mentioned, Gary said there was a lot of people are frustrated with the way things have started out. So this one's from fan 19864. Maybe time to look at another keeper. I knew last week when I went to penalties, unless they missed the goal, it was going in. Harsh maybe, but we need a big stop in the game.
Yeah, harsh. Yeah, harsh. We're in a country, and I'm not trying to say that fans' football knowledge, acumen, experience isn't deep. I'm not saying that at all. But we're in a hockey country. You pull your goalie to change things up. It's literally part of the sporting philosophy. We don't see it so much in football and soccer because your keeper is such an important part of your vocal aspect in the modern game. It's such an important part of your build-up play. When you have a keeper who your center backs and your fullbacks have confidence in behind them, it changes the entire philosophy and mood of your team. To me, and this is no disrespect to Aiden Rushness at all. We've got to see him with the under 23s. He's a kind young man. He's a professional young man. He's bided his time over the last few years and has not complained once. In fact, our good friend Marvin had nothing but glowing things to say about how kind a young man he is, how much he fits into the culture and the philosophy and the background of the club, and how he's even taken on a bit of a leadership role this year, helping some of the younger guys. and being an example of the under-23 program as well. He, I know, that said, will be chomping at the bit. And I think that that's the beauty of having the three goalkeepers now, is that it does give that added bit of pressure. You know, we're looking at Vancouver right now. There's been some questions about Big Ben. Nico's there on the bench. Ottawa, if Nate Ingham has a day off, Ryan Yesley's right there. We're starting to see keeper depth now in the country. And the Wanderers have kind of benefited from that in the past. You know, year one, our great friend Jan Michael Williams had a tough run, then caught an injury. Christian Oxner came in, and the club never looked back. And for years, I think part of the issue, as much as we loved Christian, was he didn't really have anybody breathing down his neck so much. That competition wasn't really there. Everything seemed to go back to him, even when Kieran Basket was the starter there to finish the season. Come the next season, it was just kind of Ox is going in. We trust Ox. We like Ox. And that's important to have that familiarity. I think right now that would be way too drastic of a move, because I think even though you're hitting the reset button, we don't know Aiden's connection and communication with Kale, with Dan, with Zach, with Wesley, who seems to kind of, the left back position seems to be his early in the season. And as difficult a start that this season has been, I'm not too worried or upset with how the defense has played. I think that we have played better than the score lines have implied. And we were just talking about both the CS's goals came from tough run of play, but in the end, was it really the defender's fault? No. We were talking about how the midfield kind of parted the seas for a couple of the goals against Vancouver, Pacific, and Ottawa. So to me, even though, and I know it's probably eating Yan up, you guys know him more than I do. I've only got to talk with him a couple times over the last season and a bit. But from what I've heard is he's a guy who takes things seriously and takes things to heart, and he will be as disappointed and as upset with his performances to start this season as any supporter would be. So I expect him to bounce back. And in a way, he's also been kind of a savior. He's made some big saves to start the season. So like I see where Fan is coming from, but at the same time, he's also proven his value early in the season in some situations. So I say when it comes to goalkeeper, it's a sensitive one. You got to be careful. You got to be patient. And I just think it would be way too soon to pull the plug on Yan.
Yeah. Gar?
No, I think they're all really good points. And I'm not going to add any more to the goalkeeper discussion. I'm going to hijack things for a second to become the host and ask you both a question, just because like the theme I think of the theme of the question so far and the theme of the lot of discourse has been like mild support or discontent at different elements, and that's what comes with when you're losing. And it just made me think as a wider point and a wider question that I'm going to put to you both. We really are the only Ottawa to a degree, but we really are the only club in the league who have to manage something that no other club has to manage. And that is a very vocal fan base and 3 podcasts, 3 bloggers, local media covering the team. Like this is something that other clubs in the league don't have to deal with. And this is a whole new thing for the coaching staff to manage, the social media to manage. And it's very meta because we're kind of talking about how we react to something. Maybe I like if everyone just creates negativity, it does affect people and stuff. And so my question to you two is, what kind of responsibility does the supporters who say things on social media, what the players read and the coaches read, like when this isn't Arsenal or Man United, like people read this stuff. What responsibility do supporters have, and what responsibility do podcasters and bloggers and local media have as well in supporting the club / being honest? And I don't know. I just that's an off the cuff thought I had, and just was
I
wondering
think
what you thought.
for me, I think there's a feeling amongst football fans, I think in general, that I paid my money, so I get to say what I want, kind of thing. And to a
Mm,
degree, you're right, because you're paying to watch somebody, and if you don't think they're performing correctly, and also you want your team to do well, and you have better right to call it out. On the flip side, obviously, as we just talked about with Patrice, with that moment and stuff like that, you also have to be like a little bit kind of wary of what you're putting out there, and are you actually affecting the team by just calling somebody shit, or is it not good enough? So a person whose confidence is already shot, you're not really helping matters. But I think we have like we also have a responsibility to kind of, I guess, not tap into that kind of feeling and kind of like jump on the bandwagon to try and help us get views or get clicks and all that kind of stuff. And I think speaking for us, I think we don't do that. I think we look at stuff very objectively, and obviously we have, and you've said this before, Gary, we have a wanderer's tint, so sometimes we're not always the greatest at maybe being overly critical of stuff, and maybe we should. But at the same time, though, I do think that when things aren't going right, we will give the supporters who probably don't really get a chance to say their piece. I think we do give people an opportunity, and I think because we're fans first, like we kind of feel what like an awful lot of other people are feeling. I think that's why I think it's good that we do chat about it, and I think having different people's opinions, because like obviously the other podcasts around the club probably have different views than what we have, right? And I think it kind of gives it a broad look at what it is, and I think I think for all of us that kind of the bloggers and all that kind of stuff is that when none of us are trying to like be like a Joey Barton and just like calling stuff out that has nothing to do with anything, right? And I think we're all very responsible in the way that we do stuff, because at the end of the day, like we just talked about it, like where you see people around the city and stuff like that, right? So like I don't want to be here like going like this person's shit, this person's an asshole, and then bump into them and get punched in the face and Sobeys or something. You know what I mean? So I think just even like going back to Jan, I don't like I get where people's frustration are, and the goalkeeper is an easy person to blame, and I don't think that Jan has been up to the same standard as what he had what he was last year, and he'd be the first person um to say that. But at the same time, though, the club, when we did have what Ottawa has and what Vancouver has, in having two people who are very equal chomping at the bit, it didn't push them on. Basically, we ended up with two keepers fighting, and we ended up like having somebody suspended. So, I think the club looked at that and went like, okay, this isn't the best thing for us to do, and maybe we'll take a different tack. So, I do think that we all do bear responsibility, but at the same time, though, there is a little bit of truth in the fact that you pay your money and you kind of get your chance. You do have the right to say stuff. So,
Very well said. Yeah, I think that's a good point.
yeah. So great job as a host, Gary.
Quite like being the host. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
nice.
I always knew this was I always knew this was your end game. So
And I'm not even trying to dodge an answer to that, Anthony. Your answer was literally like just pinpoint. Like I
Yeah, we should let Ant talk more, really, shouldn't we?
I don't think I don't think anybody ever wants to listen to us. So we've kind of like we've had pretty much the same questions from a lot of people just about where things are going wrong, tactics. So, I got a question from Halifax Dave, kind of the same thing, like of tactics, like do we need to change stuff? And I think we've really we've talked about it an awful lot, and I don't think that they've had the full fit squad that they probably would like to. So I thought we'd kind of just move on a little bit, and Gary, I think that it's time for us to look towards Saturday with a little bit of positivity and get a little bit of opposition corner, and then Chris, we're gonna dive into the Canadian Premier League on tour stuff that came out today. So go ahead, Gar.
Have I got music yet?
No, Chris is a musical guy, so I'm gonna get Chris to write a theme song.
Ooh, okay. Huh.
There you
That's
go.
a fun challenge.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a
All
fun
right,
challenge.
then.
And you know what? A buddy of mine, he just brushed the dust off his guitar and he's starting a band here. So that
There we
might
go.
be a fun project for him.
Hey.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. What words rhyme? What words rhyme with the word cunt? Oh God, I'll bleep that out. Go ahead, Gar.
So yeah, Cavalry on Saturday. I know you said we're looking for some positivity, but I think they're a very good team. So I can't really say too much here that's going to denigrate them in any way because they are a good team. In terms of their shape, they're kind of a 4-2-3-1-y sort of team slash 4-1-2-3 because one of their midfielders is more box to box. So they have Carducci in goal. They have Fraser Ed at right back, Camden left back, Klomp and Montgomery, or Klomp and Field as centre backs. Holding midfielders, they always have Charlie Trafford, and they either have Shome or Jess Daly or Gutierrez next to him. Musi on the right, Camargo as their 10, either Akio or Brooks as their left winger, and then Wojciechowski up front. So they're kind of a very, I've said this before about Tommy Wooden Jr., but they're a very British sort of physical, work hard, agricultural sort of team. Off the ball, 4-4-2 shape. So when they've got the ball, they like to build in either a 3-1 or a 3-2. So that three is two centre backs, and their left back becomes a left centre back, much like we used to do with Timoteo. So Camden tucks in next to Klomp and say Montgomery to form a back three. Then ahead of them, they have two holding midfielders, kind of. So they have Charlie Trafford, who always is a holding midfielder and stands very close to the centre backs. And if they have Shome playing next to him as well, he's more box to box. He likes to kind of join in with the attacking phases. He likes to drift into the right half space and occupy those those zones. Sorry, very, very good player, very technically strong. Much like Charlie Trafford, who is the other centre midfielder, excellent, excellent player. He's basically two players in one. And he has a really nice partnership with Dan Klomp, who plays a centre back. They kind of swap positions a lot because Klomp is so good on the ball. He's got license to step into midfield. When he does that, Charlie Trafford steps out of midfield and fills in for him at centre back. So it's a nice little partnership. If I think about Cavalry, they're kind of a 4+6 team. And what I mean by that is they have four defensive minded players and six attacking minded players. So their four defensive minded players are the two centre backs, the left back, and Charlie Trafford. Everyone else is considered an attacking player. Most of all, Fraser Ed, who is their right back, who is, if as attacking as Zach Fernandez is, Fraser Ed is maybe more attacking. He is always, always kind of standing on the right wing, looking to whip crosses in. He's so dangerous from those positions because he's got a lovely cross on him. He likes to stand it up. And when you've got players like Wojciechowski up front who are massive, if you just stand up across from the right wing, Wojciechowski can just attack that cross. So he's very, very dangerous. And I actually think they're really right-sided dominant. When you watch him, a lot of their attacks funnel down the right side because they've got Fraser Ed, who's keeping the width. They've got Ali Musi, who tucks into that right half space. They've got Shome, who also joins in. And the three of them just rotate really, really nicely. Wojciechowski can peel out there as well. So that right side is very strong for them. I don't think they're as strong on the left. I think Camargo's good and likes to drift out to the left. Akio, very direct, very sprinty, is good as well. But their comfort is kind of in funneling the ball into the right area of the pitch, in the right side of the pitch, and just building from there. In terms of how we beat them, I guess you just need to cut off the supply to that right side of the pitch. You need to avoid them getting the ball into Fraser Ed. You need to avoid him crossing if they do get the ball into him. You need to avoid Ali Musi picking the ball up in that right half space and driving and shooting as well. You need to stop Shome getting on the ball because he can create something out of nothing. So if you just can kind of lock down that right side of the pitch for them, easier said than done. I think whoever our left back is on the day is going to have to be really disciplined. Whoever our left holding midfielder is going to have to do a lot of running to kind of keep track of those rotations. But by them having someone like Fraser Ed, who is that attacking, that's where the space on the pitch is. That's the question coaches are always asking themselves is, where's the space on the pitch and where is the spare man? And I think the answer to both of those questions would be in the body of Massimo Ferrin, to be honest. I really, really fit, and I really hope he starts as a left midfielder if he is fit, because all of the spaces behind Fraser Red in this game. So if you can keep Massimo Ferrin high and wide, if you can absolve him of all of his defensive duties and just say stay high and wide the whole match, one of two things is going to happen. Either Fraser Ed is going to be very reluctant to be that attacking because he knows he's behind him, so he's going to kind of rein it in a bit, in which case you kind of nullify a bit of that attacking threat. Or he's still going to be a right winger, he's still going to be very attacking, and Cavalry to compensate are going to have to drag one of their centre backs over to Massimo Ferrin every time he gets the ball, which isolates their other centre back. And if you can get bodies around that other centre back, maybe there's some space there, maybe there's some danger there. But again, easier said than done. What I will say is, I think whoever plays centre forward for us as striker, the ball has to stick to them. It really has to stick to them because that's when you can take advantage of them. The spaces on our left wing and the spaces either side of Charlie Trafford if he gets left on an island as their single pivot. And we just need to find ways to get the ball into those spaces. But it's going to be tough. They're a really physical team, very well organised, very good, but they do commit a lot of bodies forward. And if we can take advantage of that, then hey, who knows?
But Charlie Trafford has definitely turned into being one of the best signings that has come into the league. I mean, like, they got him from Wrexham, and he had a pretty good career in Scotland and stuff like that. So
I think he's
yeah,
the only player in the league who you can play as a single pivot in central
yeah.
midfield. I don't think anyone else can do that because he covers ground so nicely. I don't even think Lorenzo can because Lorenzo likes to like drift about a little bit. He likes to pull wide to go looking for the ball. So on the ball, he's good enough to be a single pivot, but he hasn't got the recovery pace to cover ground off the ball. Whereas Charlie Trafford's got both because he's such an athlete as well, isn't he? He can cover both spaces in one.
And he's also like a master shithouse as well. So
Yeah,
yeah,
he's
yeah,
a dick in a good
yeah,
way.
yeah.
Yeah, he follows me on Twitter, actually. I'm not going to call him a dick. He's a brilliant player.
I think he would say he's a dick, to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
I think he's one of those guys that
Wonderful guy
revels in
though.
it. I think Fraser Ayre is the same too. They kind of revel in that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wonderful guy though, man. Charlie
uh,
is gave us the time of day more than I think just about any away player not named Nico G.
yeah,
Charlie's top quality guy.
Yeah, it'd probably
yeah.
be my dream signing for us, actually, Charlie Trafford would be.
Him and Lorenzo would be a
Oh,
dream team.
mate, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
So that's enough of us fawning over Charlie Trafford. He, I love that his passion in life is mushrooms. So he has a mushroom farm.
I am a
Uh,
huge, I love
yeah,
mushrooms as
yeah.
well. I
So
put them in everything.
he grows and sells exotic mushrooms. So
Does he really? That's,
yeah. And he yeah, if yeah, it's Trafford Farms. If you look it up on Twitter, you can see his array of mushrooms.
have you
I
had him
actually
on? Have you had him on the show?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
We
okay.
had him on when he signed for Cavalry. He was just after his because when he went to Wrexham, Ryan Reynolds had just bought the club, and it was like a big Welsh thing, right? So he had a big thing with Ryan Reynolds being introduced at the what was it, the race course where they held their state their round is.
Yeah, yeah.
But he never actually played for them, so he's kind of like who's that Somalian guy that we had here the first season? The guy who only played international football, but never is it Aziz or something?
Aziz, yeah,
Yeah,
Abdul
yeah.
Aziz.
Charlie,
I'm
Char
so,
Charlie Trafford is Wrexham disease.
except Charlie Trafford is a human being that
Yeah.
actually exists, and Aziz is not. Aziz is a headshot,
It's funny
AI
too.
generated headshot.
It's funny.
I think I went into Walmart and I saw one of those photo frames, and his head was in one of those photo frames.
Mate, if we ever want to do a spin-off, Down the Pub Investigates, that entire story, we've got to do an investigative podcast about that.
Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off, buddy.
Oh no, I honestly I was just kind of gonna joke like he was a nice guy. I did get to meet him once or twice.
Have you chatted to him, yeah?
He very quiet. His English wasn't even all that great, but he hung out with like the Chris No Bona circle. So,
Right.
but he was also really young. So when those guys were going out downtown and partying and stuff, he couldn't go. Plus, because he was Muslim, so he wasn't much of a drinker, and a lot of the restaurants didn't really cater halal food. So like he didn't get to go out. So that even added to the mystery to an extent. It was like I was so involved in the social circle with these guys that first year, but he was such an enigma. I do have his autograph though.
Oh, that's
Do
amazing.
It is
So,
rare.
so,
you know,
so if anybody listening to the show has a picture of themselves with Aziz, we'd love to see it.
if anyone has if anyone has contact information for him, we'd love to get him on, to be honest. I did see him out in the community once, and it was like the oddest couple ever. Him and Luis Pereira in Sephora.
Oh
I
my,
saw once.
in
Just
Sephora?
in Sephora, just shopping together in their wondrous tracksuits.
Get,
That I
getting their makeup done.
Maybe. In that first season, you honestly in the first season you couldn't move for fucking Wondrous players in the mall, in the shopping centre. Go there on any given night and there'd be about seven of them in
There's not much
tracksuits
else.
walking about.
There's not much else to
Yeah.
do, really, is there? Right?
But
So,
I never see
Literally.
him other than the Yan sign in Walmart. I never see him about anymore. They're
yeah, well,
hermits.
they're exclusive. They go to like because they're like celebrities now. They probably get like after hour shopping and stuff like that, right?
Mm.
So,
I saw
um,
when I was with Callum's dad one evening last season, Dan and Callum came along, and I remember I was having a quick chat with him, and I said to him like just out of curiosity, do people ever actually recognize you? And they were like Callum all the time. Dan never, but Callum, because of his hair, always getting stops and people talking to him.
but
Cool.
he's cut his hair now, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, so maybe he doesn't want to be seen around the great city of Chattanooga as much. So maybe he
You
wants
know who he
to. He's
looks
from.
like now his hair's been cut. He looks like a weird mix of Tim Roth from and Wes Anderson, the director.
Oh my God, that's amazing. All right, so we could be here all night talking about mystery Wonder Fair. Yesterday, an email went out to people to say that there was going to be a big announcement today in Kelowna. I hope I got that right again. About a big announcement coming from Vancouver FC and the CPL, and it got announced today the CPL on tour. So there's a couple of things, and Chris, I know you kind of looked into this because you made a comment on Twitter or stuff about it today. So there's a couple of things. The Vancouver fans don't seem too happy about it. Are they trying to? There's part of it, them saying that this could help get more franchises into the league. Do you think that's actually like is this a good idea to help that along the way? And as Wanderers fans, if one of our games gets put into Moncton or something like that, how happy would you be and would you go? There you go. It'll trifecta of questions there, if you would.
You know my memory too. I'm gonna have to ask you
Yeah,
to
I know.
repeat what's it. A quick background, actually. I was lucky enough to kind of get a heads up on this last year during the CPL Business Summit. It was here in Halifax. And I'm friends with friends. So, I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to burn people or get anybody in trouble. But I was lucky enough to actually kind of get the preview of this plan. And Anthony, I know you're in the Facebook group. We even talked about this during the preseason. I was chatting about preseason tours and this and that with a little bit of prior knowledge that the owners in the league were actually kind of discussing this and thinking about it. Initially, obviously, in an era of expansion, these matches, these events, that's the purpose, to test the waters, to see who's going to bite, how many people are going to put down season ticket deposits, are the facilities actually up to par. It's one thing to inspect and to see pictures and take tours, but it's another thing to actually see 90 minutes with the fans, with the security, with the clubs. So initially, obviously, like I said, expansion is the reason, but this was something that a lot of the owners saw as that extra step to security. So it's a growing league still. The money flowing into the league isn't exactly robust, but there are a lot of investors looking at the league from many countries all over the world. And that's one of the biggest, I guess, crutches for the league so far, is that if you look at these 8 programs, and you can include Edmonton to say 9, I would say only two have been an arousing success. And I say arousing success because we brag about it. We talk about it all the time. It's us, and I would say Forge. Ottawa will claim so, and to an extent, they're right. But when you look at who's backing them, a big club like Atletico, and they're doing all these different promotions to draw fans rather than actually having a foundation of fans, I don't quite put them in the success pool yet. They're trending, but they're not quite there yet. So the purpose of this was to, like, I'm repeating myself now, expansion, but also to give different markets an opportunity and the owners an opportunity to make money in different markets where there could be a bit of stagnation in their market. So right now with Vancouver, to be polite, they're not doing great. Their season ticket metrics actually went down from year one to year two. They're the first and only club in the league, I believe, to do that. Even Edmonton had a +1. And it's an interesting metric to discuss because we're talking about a COVID year where we didn't even necessarily have a season to brag about for year two. So the year three turned to year four numbers. There was always kind of an asterisk next to it because almost every market was rebuilding from scratch. So come last year, year five, you were starting to see more of what that foundation was. Well, that's Vancouver's first year. So again, you give them a little bit of grace. The crowds weren't great last year, but you saw a bit of momentum gaining. And even the first game this year, it seemed like, okay, they've turned the corner. Gary gave us the preview. The club looks good. An enjoyable brand of football. They're actually winning games. These guys are something. And it seems like in the last couple of weeks, whether it's on the field, behind the scenes, business wise, etc., they seem to have just completely fallen off of a cliff. So I'm speculating. I'm guessing what happened was Rob Friend, who has tons of experience running clubs in this league, he's on club number 2 now, knowing that Kelowna is a market that is on the cusp, that supports the sport and has the infrastructure, knowing that this CPL on tour is coming. The original plan and idea, I believe, was 2025. Don't quote me on that. It could have been 2026, coincide with the World Cup. Makes a lot of sense. Why not bring your top league on tour when the whole world is here? So to my knowledge, but purely speculating, I think Vancouver sees this opportunity to offset a loss. You've got one less home game, so you're not paying rent on your stadium. You're offsetting maybe some of the security fees. Yeah, you might not be making a lot in concessions anyways, so you're going to be getting a lot more in concessions in Kelowna. It seems like it's going to be a split of sorts, but Vancouver is going to get more of that split. And I don't know if the other part of that split is going to just go to Cavalry or if this is something where all the other owners in the league are going to get, a couple of bucks here, a couple of bucks there. From a Vancouver fan perspective, I can't blame them. The very common and popular opinion is this should have been announced before the season, but back to the spleel I just kind of ranted. I don't think at the start of the season they knew this was going to be a thing. This feels almost like you got the glass thing on the wall in case of emergency, break glass. That's what this feels like for Vancouver. It sounds dire, but we've seen clubs come and go in this league already, and Edmonton had history, and Edmonton had a foundation. So Rob, being from a successful background at Pacific, is starting to see the writing on the wall where he didn't see with Pacific. And this to me just kind of feels like I said, break glass in case of emergency. So I can't blame the fans, though. To lose a home game, you're essentially the financial foundation of a brand new club. You're paying the players' wages. You're paying the security guard. You're literally the heartbeat of the club. For them to take one of those games that you paid for 4 hours up the road with no real incentive. I thought there was, Anthony, but like we were just talking about on air beforehand, there is no like free ticket option for traveling Vancouver fans. They still have to pay a fee on top. Or the other end is you just get a ticket for another game down the road. Well, I already have a ticket for another game down the road and nobody comes to these games. So like who am I going to give this other ticket to? So I see where Vancouver's strategy is with that. They think that by giving out tickets to other games that are already paid for, that's going to be an additional draw. But that we've seen that not work in Ottawa to an extent. They've got great crowds with some of these promotions, but they're not bringing in 8,000 to 10,000 that they were projecting. And I know that that's what they were projecting. So I get all three, Anthony?
The last one was, as a Halifax fan, and they said they
Ah,
were going to put a game in Moncton. Like, A, would you go, and B, like, how happy would you be?
definitely would go. If it was a home game, I wouldn't necessarily be happy, but I wouldn't be against it because, again, do you want a league? Do you want a club? If this is something that the owners recognize as a huge kitty that is untapped money, I'm all for it in that sense. It's a controversial topic because they do it in the NFL, and it's been successful in some markets. It's been a huge failure in other markets. I know the is it the La Liga are doing it next year? I could be
Well,
wrong, but I think
was it last year? I think that they were going to they played a game in Saudi Arabia or something like the
yeah,
They
yeah,
played their version of the soup, their like charity shield,
yeah,
whatever they
yeah,
call it in Saudi Arabia. Yeah,
yeah.
but they were really disappointed because Real Madrid and Barca didn't get to the
it was
final
like
or
I
something.
think it was like Sevilla and somebody else,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
quite funny, really.
But it seems like every sport's kind of doing it. The NHL go all around the world, but they also do alternate markets. Sometimes the Leafs will do their preseason in Hamilton or Scarborough or whatever else, right? But, to me, what we have here in Halifax, you don't want to take that market out of where it's generating money because, again, the Wanderers are raking in a lot of cash, but I know there's a cut that goes to the league, the league's other seven owners. They love Halifax because we're at least covering some taxes or something, right? Like, so taking a game from Halifax and putting it in Moncton, whilst it might draw a bigger crowd just because of the limitations that we have at the Wanderers grounds, is there longevity there to do it year after year after year? So the plan that I heard originally was that the league were going to find a way to make it that each team still had their 14 home games and take the neutral game out of the away game pool. Now, mathematically, obviously, that doesn't really work out that way. You would have to have two neutral games per each club, but that might be the future. That could be what ends up happening. Ottawa ends up coming to Moncton to play the Wanderers, and then let's say York follows in, and then Halifax will go to Windsor, and then they'll play Forge. There's a way and there's a will, I think, to find ways to make more money. And I think that this is something that we're going to have to get used to, especially since the league seems to be marketing it as a full tour type thing. But to answer that last question, yes, I would go. Would I be happy? Only if I know that it's for the security of the league.
There's been a mixed reaction to it online,
Mm-hmm.
as I said. I saw somebody, and I kind of tend to agree with them on this one. I saw a comment from somebody saying like this should have been a preseason thing,
Yes.
as you mentioned. So like, why not do like a preseason tournament or do like a little exhibition games in different spots and kind of build like a little And obviously, it's tough doing that in Canada. I get it, but it just seems to me that like it just seems like a league in panic by the way that they're doing it. Like just a last minute, like whatever, like screw it, like kind of do over your own fans to like put a game like 4 hours away. And like the worst thing that's going to happen is if nobody goes to the fucking thing, it's going to look
Yeah.
absolutely awful. I don't know, like I don't know out west, I don't really know the East Coast, but I don't know what it's like to try and get from Calvary to Kelowna. Like I don't know if that's a really awkward journey, if there's like flights in or whatever like that. So if you're not going to get Cavalry fans making the trip, and they're already pissed off that they have to go and play a game in Pacific this year, right? So, and then you're trying to drag your home base up the road 4 hours. Like I just think it's kind of like a little bit narrow-minded, I think. But
Yeah.
I hopefully will be proved wrong. But I just think it's just sends out a really bad message when you look at it like objectively that
Yeah.
the franchise isn't working in Vancouver. Like when they came along, I thought the Vancouver name wasn't the way to go with it because you've got the Whitecaps, and I think like you're trying to play in the same market. It would have been like York trying to call themselves Toronto United or something. You know what I mean? I think they're starting to realize that they kind of made a mistake in the way that they kind of branded the club. Maybe their jerseys have been fantastic, and everybody's like all that kind of stuff. And but hearing things like that, their ticket sales has kind of gone down,
Yeah.
and when you're looking at the games, it looks like a modular stadium close to what the Wanderers have, but it always kind of looks empty, and it doesn't look great because the first couple of games they were really busy. The first game this season they got like 3,000, I think, or close to 3,000. and it just seems like it's kind of dropping off. And I think there would be more. They would have, to me, it would make more sense to put that energy into building the brand where they are than to try and just drag it down the road to make a couple of bucks.
Well, that's literally it. Like I've been saying to people from a business perspective, it makes some sense. You're offsetting some catastrophic losses if some of the words on the ground are true. To not have to pay rent for a game, the city of Kelowna is going to take care of that because they want professional football. There's a fear of, and I'm not saying this facetiously, of the hundreds of Vancouver fans that have propped this club up with their season ticket money, that if this Kelowna thing is a huge success, well, why the fuck would Vancouver stay in Vancouver?
Yeah, those made a franchise, right?
Right? So, like, the CPL on tour thing has a lot of potential to be something great. But like you said, Anthony, the way they're doing it this year, it feels like a panic. It feels like as the other owners are affected by Vancouver not doing well, they need that other club to continue to have this 28 game cycle. They want to increase that cycle, be it by 4 or 6 games. I don't know what the end goal is going to be when it's a 10-team league, but they're now probably trying to accelerate to that point too. And if there's a net nil and Vancouver folds and the Kelowna comes in, they're going to pat themselves on the back and say, okay, that's because we tested the market. Let's now try York and Windsor, right? More franchises are more fees, but healthier franchises is just more revenue. And I think that now the league is now entering the second 5-year phase. We know that there's going to be a brand new television deal on the horizon, whether it's with One Soccer or not. And we're seeing the sleeve sponsors now coming in. We're starting to see branding be more open and being more acceptable individually. It's not a league-wide thing. The clubs are now branding out more. The clubs are branching out more into their communities with businesses. And we've done a great job here in Halifax working with some of the local brewers and clothing companies and stuff. But like Derek always said, there's still a restriction of who you can work with. The CPL still has to approve that, right? There's less of a restriction now. So this, as poorly done, I think that it is. The potential is there, and I hope that it comes good because more is more jobs for more players, more fans for more money. But as I said to you, Anthony, before we came on the air, the more I read into this, the less I like it. It just seems like a slap in the face to grassroots fans of a club that, even though they're struggling, that's what this sport is supposed to be all about, is the grassroots. You can't slap those people in the face.
Yeah, and like they're still double like the fans of what York, and York's been around for 6 years, right? So it's kind of a weird one. I don't know, Gary, if you have anything to add to that.
No, not massively. The business side of it, I'm a football man. I like the football side of it. The business side is interesting, but I've not got an aptitude for like that side of it.
Yeah.
So Chris is far more knowledgeable than me.
Yeah, and I'm an old cynic, and that's why I kind of poo-poo a lot of this stuff. But as I said, it just kind of just leaves a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth. It could be just the dinner my wife made. So lads, it's been great. I think we've covered an awful lot here, and appreciate everybody's questions as always. Like, we really do appreciate people giving us their time to type us out a question on Twitter and stuff like that. And
if anyone wants to donate to Anthony's divorce fund after that comment, feel free. I'm sure he'll set up a GoFundMe.
Child support.
Yeah.
Child support.
Oh dear God. Thanks a lot, lads.
We love you.
Yeah, let's hope we get a win on Saturday. Take care, lads.
Come on, boys. Come on, boys.
Folks, please. Right foot, please. Time to drink up, folks. Get out. Out to